There is an aspect of the Russian-Ukraine war that I want to talk about, and this has to do with sanctions because we are trying to use sanctions, and it's our hope that with sanctions we can hurt Russia to the point where the elites within Russia will rise up and remove Vladimir Putin from office. That has been our goal for probably the last 10 years, if not longer. We hate Putin. During the 2016 election, he was made out to be the devil. And the U.S. geopolitical establishment has wanted to remove him for a very long time. And they're hoping with sanctions that they can do this. So the question is, will this happen? And the short answer is probably not. And here's why. If you look at a map, and you can go to Wikipedia and see which countries are sanctioning Russia, it's pretty funny. You have Canada, the United States, you have Western Europe, you have Japan, South Korea, and Australia. And one tiny country somewhere in South America that I can't even identify. The rest of the world has not levied sanctions, meaning South America, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, India and China. They have not sanctioned Russia. And why is this? And that is simply because Russia exports raw materials, and for countries that are developing, they need more than anything raw materials. Without raw materials, they cannot develop their economies. So they don't have the luxury that developed economies do to sanction Russia. Now, if you look at Russia's exports, their top 10 exports, we have mineral fuels, including oil, which is number one. You have gems, precious metals, iron, steel, fertilizers, wood, machinery, including computers, cereals, aluminum, ores, and plastics. But it's really that top three that are the most important: oil, gems, and iron. And because they export raw materials, that gives their economy some protection against these sanctions, because all of those countries that are developing in Africa, and particularly India and China, they need those materials. Now, if you have an economy that produces finished goods, and by finished goods, I mean things like electronics and cars, things that you sell to consumers, those can be damaged more by sanctions because there is a competition for finished goods. If, for example, you're sanctioning Japan and they sell cars, well, consumers have the option to go buy cars from the United States, from Korea, from Germany, from Italy. There are other places to buy those finished goods. So you can sanction a developed country and hurt them because what they sell, there's competition from other countries. But when it comes to raw materials, and there's a limit to raw materials on this earth, it is harder to sanction them because these developing countries need these materials. So if you're not aware of this, Russia and China just concluded a 20-year cooperation agreement. And right now, before this war started, they were working on a cooperation agreement with Iran. And so they were preparing for some sort of action by the Western countries when they invaded Ukraine. Now, the narrative right now is that Putin invaded impulsively and had no plan for what was going to happen next, and he was surprised and shocked by the Ukrainian resistance and the harshness of the sanctions that came at him from the West. That's the narrative. Is that correct? Not exactly. Whether or not he was surprised by the Ukrainian resistance, I think we're going to find that out over the next 6 months, because the fog of war, it's hard to figure out what's real. As far as the sanctions, did he anticipate them? I think so. And based on what he has done as far as planning for over the last 5 years in preparation for this moment, I would say that he knew these sanctions were coming, which is why he had these things worked out with China and why India won't get on board. And again, all of these developing countries aren't getting on board with sanctions. They want raw materials to develop their economy. So I think I think we're hoping for a lot if we think that Russia's just going to collapse or Putin's going to be murdered. Like Lindsey Graham is hoping that somebody within his administration will have that Julius Caesar moment where they take him out. That's not going to happen. And it's because of what their economy is made of and what the rest of the world wants from their economy. And half the world is divided, or the world is divided. Half of them want what they have because they are necessary for their development. China needs oil. They need materials. They want to pass the United States, and they can't do that if they cut off sources of these raw materials. So we have to see the bigger picture here. Putin's been in power for 20 years now, and it's not because he's an idiot. If you think that, you're falling for this mainstream media narrative. He's not an idiot. He understood this, and right now they're hunkering down and they are playing the long game. And that's where we need to be careful, because our leaders, unfortunately, they're not very bright. They think they are. And if you've watched Joe Biden, you've seen Kamala Harris in Europe, my God, it's frightening. Whatever they said about Sarah Palin, Kamala Harris is 10 times worse. She's a certified dummy. It's actually quite shocking that she was the Attorney General of California and a U.S. Senator, and she's that stupid. It is unbelievable. But that's where we're at now. So right now, how is this war going to turn out? Is Putin going to, come out on top? I don't know. What I do know is that he's not the fool that the U.S. media is making him out to be. And we have a disadvantage in that our leaders aren't that smart. And with democracy, with leadership changing every 4 years, it's harder to have long-term planning that countries like Putin or like Russia and China can have. They can plan for the long term because their leaders are in there for the long term, and things are more stable as far as how they can plan over 10, 20 years. Where here in this country, we had Trump come in, that threw a wrench into plans. It created all this turmoil. Now the deep state is trying to wrestle back that power and get things back under control. But now we have skyrocketing inflation, and our economy is right on the cusp. We are right there. I think people are underestimating just how damaging it is to have part of your economy shut down for a significant period of time and just printing all this money. Those chickens will come home to roost. And you almost think that this war is a great, great distraction for the economic chaos that we're currently experiencing and the economic chaos that might get a lot worse over the next year. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates a tiny bit, but not nearly enough to tackle inflation, because they have to pick between tackling inflation and crushing the economy if they raise interest rates too high. Basically, the Federal Reserve is stuck between a rock and a hard place, and whatever they do is not going to bring us any sort of relief, because we're screwed. There is no solution for what our government and Federal Reserve have done the last 3 or 4 years. There is no easy out. It's going to be painful, and it's either inflation or you raise interest rates and the whole economy just sinks. So we're in for a wild ride coming up these next 1, 2, 5 years, and be prepared, because anything is possible. And if we've learned anything from the last few years, it's exactly that. Anything is possible. Well, that's it for now. Again, if you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.